From Anshe Sfard, Bethel Emeth Congregation, it's time to take 10 minutes for Torah with Rabbi Joel Finkelstein.
Welcome to our discussion of Parshat Naso, the blessings of the people by the people. If we look in Parshat Naso, we find that the culmination of the discussion of various ways in which the camp can stay together and stay holy. Torah speaks of the Cohanim bestowing a blessing upon the Jewish people. At first blush, it seems that the Cohanim grant a blessing to the Jewish people. However, there's a strange phenomenon, and that is that although the Cohanim are endowed with this power to bless the Jews, we only do it in the context of a minyan. There's no concept that a Kohen can just walk over to you and give you a blessing. Hey, how are you? Yivarecha Hashem v'yishmerecha. It has to be done in a very specific context. At the end of the prayers, with a minyan, in the Chazarat Hashatz, the congregational Amidah. Why? Why the need for the communal context, for a minyan, for purposes of the Birkat Cohanim, of giving the priestly blessings to the Jewish people? In the Talmud, it's just lumped together with other things that require a minyan. And Nesiyat Kapayim in that context is seen as the Davar Shebekdusha. It's a matter of holiness. Mentioning God's name, Kol Davar Shebekdusha, Lo Yeh Pachot Me'asara, anything that relates to holiness, it needs 10. And therefore, it's done with a minyan. Why at the end of davening particularly, it says in Parshat Shmini, that Aaron at Kapav, Aaron gave a blessing to the Jewish people. Vayer Masor HaChatav Ve'olav Hashlamim. That's at that time he came down, he finished off the various offerings, the various sacrifices. It's only at the end of the service that we bestow the Birkat Cohanim. But why a minyan? Rabbeinu Nisim, or the Ran, Spanish authority, he says that there's a linguistic link between the Birkat Cohanim and the idea of a minyan. The idea of a minyan comes from the verse, V'niktashti b'toch b'nei Yisrael, I will be sanctified among the Jewish people. When it comes to Birkat Cohanim, it says, Ko tevarchu et b'nei Yisrael, it speaks of blessing the b'nei Yisrael. Whenever it speaks of b'nei Yisrael, it means a minyan. So there's a technical, textual answer as to why we need a minyan. The Aruch HaShulchan says, you know why you need a minyan? What does a minyan do? When there's kol be'asara shchinta sharia, whenever there are 10, the Shechina, the divine presence, is present. And therefore, since there's divine presence, only when there's divine presence, then and only then can you have Birkat Cohanim. You can have blessing when there's divine presence. When is a divine presence? When there's a minyan. There's no minyan, no divine presence, no blessing can be given. We know that the divine presence is so strong when it comes to Birkat Cohanim that in the Holy Temple in Jerusalem, when they did Birkat Cohanim, no one could look at their fingers when they were giving the blessing, because the Shechina was so powerfully and palpably found there in the hands of the Kohanim. But of course, we need to remember that the Kohanim really are not the ones giving the blessing. The Kohanim, v'ani avarchim, God is the one who gives the blessing. And the rabbis interpret, Amor lahem, you have to say to them. If the Chazan doesn't say, Yivarecha Hashem v'yishmerecha, if the Chazan doesn't feed the blessings to them, if the Chazan or the congregation doesn't say, Kohanim, call on the Kohanim to give the blessings, they can't give the blessing. The blessing basically comes, the authority for the blessing comes from the people, by the people. And therefore, if there's no minyan, there's no authorization of Bnei Yisrael, the authorization of the Jewish people to give the blessing. What is a minyan? A minyan is a quorum of the entire nation of Israel. Unless the entire nation of Israel, or a quorum thereof, gives you the authority to give a blessing, then you may not give a blessing. The minyan is needed for the authority. Rabbi Samson Raphael Hirsch says something interesting. He says, why is it that when we get to Birkat Cohanim, we don't look at the Kohanim. We look toward the Kohanim. Don't look away. We look toward, panim el panim, face to face. But we close our eyes. We don't look at them. Why not? Because there's an illusion. The illusion is, says Rabbi Samson Raphael Hirsch, that the Kohanim are giving you the blessing. But it's not true. it's really God. V'ani avarchem. It says explicitly in the verse that it's God who gives the blessing. And therefore, that's an illusion. And the idea is that it's the minyan, it's the kavana, the intent of the congregation that they are being blessed by God. That's the important thing. Not just a Kohen, but you need a whole congregation conjuring up the image of God blessing us rather than the Cohanim. Rabbi Azikri, the author of the Sefer Charedim, also the author of the poem Yedid Nefesh, he writes that actually the mitzvah Birkat Kohanim, yes, it's a mitzvah on the Kohen to give a blessing. True. But there's also a mitzvah on the Jew to get blessed. If a Jew is standing there in shul and he's getting the blessing of Birkat Kohanim, he gets a mitzvah. How could he get a mitzvah? I thought the Kohen is doing the action. No, being blessed by a Kohen, that itself is a mitzvah. In other words, the locus of this mitzvah is not only with the Kohen, but it's with the congregation. And it requires a whole congregation. It requires a minyan. The blessings actually come from the ones who are being blessed, and it requires a minyan to create that mitzvah. So it turns out that our prayers are more democratic than we think. It's not some people on their high horse standing on the duchan, standing on a platform, giving a blessing to the lowly congregants. But rather, the blessing, the mitzvah in some ways comes from the people. The authority comes from the people. And the minyan is there to remind us that without the community, the Kohen is nothing. The Kohen is a shlucha de Rachmana. He's a shliach. He's a representative of God. He's also a shluach didan. He's also a shliach, a messenger of the congregation itself. And therefore the Birkat Kohanim must be done with a minyan, because we have to give him that authority to be our messenger, to bring down the divine presence, and then to get that blessing. We sometimes forget the power of a tzibur, the power of a congregation, and what a force we can be, a force to bring comfort to others, a force to create community, a force to create times of joy and times of sorrow, and to share times of sorrow together. That's the power of community. Ultimately, we have the power to bring the Shekhinah, to bring the divine presence, to bring the blessings from God. Kohen is a very important figure in our community, but he only represents the congregation. And it's the congregation that has the great power to give blessing to itself. Thank you for joining here at the Anshe Sfard Bethel Emeth congregation here in Memphis, Tennessee. And thanks to Jason Lefkowitz for making today's presentation possible. And thanks to all of you for joining us. Welcome to see other presentations we have from previous years, the Parsha, and on the various holidays. Thank you.
This has been 10 Minutes for Torah with Rabbi Joel Finkelstein. To learn more, visit ASBEE.org.